At 35, he was worth over $2 billion, commanded respect in every boardroom, and had never met a deal he could not close. His life was a masterpiece of precision and control. Every moment was scheduled, every decision calculated, every relationship strategic. The three executives seated across from him were discussing the finer points of the acquisition, their voices blending into background noise. Marcus's mind was elsewhere, already planning his next move. The merger would secure his position as the dominant force in artificial intelligence development. It was another victory in a life full of them. Asterisk, he lifted his wine glass, scanning the restaurant's elegant interior. Soft jazz played in the background while waiters moved silently between tables. Everything was exactly as it should be. Predictable, controlled, perfect, until it was not. "Excuse me, sir?" The small voice cut through the sophisticated atmosphere. Like a bell, Marcus turned, expecting to see a waiter, but instead found himself looking down at a little girl. She could not have been more than 7 years old, with shoulder-length brown hair and wearing a simple blue dress that looked slightly too big for her small frame. Marcus frowned. Children were not common in establishments like this, especially not unaccompanied ones. He glanced around the restaurant, searching for frantic parents, but saw none. The girl stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her, looking up at him with wide, serious eyes. "Are you lost?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the authority he was accustomed to using. The girl shook her head slowly. "No, sir." "I'm looking for someone? Where are your parents?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "My mama is not here anymore." Something in her tone made Marcus set down his wine glass. The executives at his table had gone quiet, watching the unusual scene unfold. Marcus ignored them, focusing entirely on the child standing before him. "Ain't what? Is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Sophie," she replied. "Sophie Chen." The name meant nothing to him, but there was something about the way she said it, the way she held herself, that seemed familiar. She was not crying or scared, just determined in a way that reminded him of someone, though he could not place who. "Sophie, who are you looking for?" She reached into the small purse slung across her shoulder and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it, revealing a photograph. She held it up for him to see. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The photo showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She was beautiful, with long black hair and delicate features. But it was not her face that made his heart pound. It was the recognition that hit him like a physical blow. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is my mama," Sophie said simply. Her name was Lisa Chen. She told me that if something ever happened to her, I should find the man in this picture. She pulled out a second photograph from the paper, and Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. It was a picture of himself, but younger, taken 7 years ago. He was standing next to Lisa at a company party, both of them smiling, both of them unaware that their brief relationship would create something so permanent. Lisa? He had not thought about her in years. She had been a brilliant software engineer, who had worked for his company for less than a year. They had dated for a few months, but when she left to take a position with a competitor, they had lost touch. He had been too focused on his career to pursue anything serious with anyone. "She said you were my father," Sophie continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. Marcus stared at the photograph, then at Sophie, then back at the photograph. The resemblance was undeniable now that he was looking for it. She had Lisa's delicate features, but her eyes, her determined expression, the way she held herself with quiet confidence, that was all him. "When did your mother pass away?" he asked, surprised by how difficult it was to form the words. 2 weeks ago, Sophie replied. "She was sick for a long time. The doctor said her heart was not strong enough." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, processing the information. Lisa was gone. The woman who had given him a daughter he never knew existed was gone. And now that daughter was standing in front of him, looking for a father who had been absent from her entire life. "Where have you been staying?" he asked with Mrs. Patterson. "Our neighbor. But she says she cannot keep me much longer. She has her own family to take care of." Marcus glanced around the restaurant again, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this setting was for such a conversation. The executives at his table were watching with barely concealed curiosity, and he could see other diners beginning to take notice of the unusual scene. "Sophie," he said, standing up from his chair, "would you like to get some fresh air? We can talk outside?" She nodded, clutching the photographs to her chest. Marcus placed a hand gently on her shoulder, guiding her toward the exit. As they walked, he caught the eye of his assistant, who was seated at a nearby table, and gave her a subtle signal. She would handle the executives, reschedule the meeting, make the necessary apologies. Right now, nothing mattered except the little girl walking beside him. Outside, the evening air was cool and crisp. Marcus led Sophie to a quiet bench in the small garden area adjacent to the restaurant. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but here, surrounded by carefully manicured plants and the soft sound of a fountain, they had privacy. Sophie sat down beside him, her feet not quite touching the ground. She was so small, so fragile, yet there was a strength in her that reminded him of himself at that age. She was a fighter, just like he had been. "Tell me about your mother," Marcus said gently. Sophie's eyes lit up for the first time since their conversation began. "She was the smartest person I ever knew. She could fix anything with computers, and she always helped me with my homework. She made the best pancakes on Saturday mornings, and she read to me every night before bed." Marcus listened, absorbing every detail. He had missed all of this. 7 years of Saturday morning pancakes, bedtime stories, homework help, and countless other moments that made up a childhood. 7 years of his daughter's life that he could never get back. "She talked about you sometimes," Sophie continued. "She said you were very smart and very busy. She said you had important work to do. Did she ever tell you why she never contacted me?" Sophie nodded. She said she was scared. She said you had a big life, and she did not want to make it complicated. Marcus felt a sharp pang of regret. Lisa had been protecting him, making the decision for both of them. But in doing so, she had robbed him of the chance to be a father to his daughter. More importantly, she had robbed Sophie of the chance to have a father. "Sophie," he said, turning to face her fully, "I want you to know that if I had known about you, I would have been there. I would have been part of your life from the very beginning." She studied his face with those serious eyes. "Do you want to be part of my life now?" The question was so simple, so direct, that it took his breath away. This was not a business negotiation or a strategic decision. This was a little girl asking if he wanted to be her father. Yes, he said without hesitation. More than anything. For the first time since they had met, Sophie smiled. It was a small, tentative smile, but it transformed her entire face. In that moment, Marcus realized that everything he had thought was important in his life, the deals, the money, the power, meant nothing compared to this. "What happens now?" Sophie asked. Marcus reached out and gently took her hand. It was so small in his, so trusting. "Now we figure out how to be a family." As they sat together on the bench, father and daughter for the first time, Marcus knew that his carefully controlled world was about to change forever. And for the first time in his life, he was not afraid of losing control. He was ready to embrace it. 3 weeks had passed since that life-changing evening at the Crystal Room, Marcus Sterling's penthouse apartment. Once a showcase of modern minimalism and cold perfection, had undergone a remarkable transformation. Colorful drawings now decorated. The refrigerator, small shoes sat by the entrance, and the sound of laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for years. Marcus stood in the doorway of what was now Sophie's bedroom, watching her carefully arrange her books on the new shelves they had picked out together. The room was painted a soft lavender purple, her favorite color, and filled with furniture sized just for her. Stuffed animals sat on the bed next to the framed photograph of her mother that Sophie treasured. "Dad, do you think Mama would like my new room?" Sophie asked, looking up from organizing her collection of chapter books. The word Dad still sent a warm feeling through Marcus's chest every time she said it. "I think she would love it, sweetheart. She would be proud of how brave you have been." Sophie smiled and returned to her books. Marcus marveled at how naturally she had adapted to their new life together. She was resilient in a way that amazed him perhaps inheriting his own determination along with her mother's gentle spirit. The transition had not been without challenges. Marcus had to learn the complexities of school schedules, bedtime routines, and the importance of having the right snacks in the pantry. His board meetings now ended promptly at 3, so he could pick Sophie up from her new private school. Business associates had been surprised by the sudden changes in his schedule, but Marcus found he did not care about their opinions. "Are you ready for dinner?" Marcus asked, checking his watch. Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Can we make spaghetti?" "Again, I like when we cook together," Marcus chuckled. Cooking had become one of their favorite shared activities, even though his culinary skills had been limited to ordering takeout before Sophie arrived. Now they spent evenings experimenting with simple recipes, usually ending up with flour on their clothes and smiles on their faces. As they prepared dinner together in the kitchen, Sophie chattering about her day at school, Marcus reflected on how completely his priorities had shifted. The merger that had seemed so critical 3 weeks ago had been completed successfully, but he barely remembered the details. His focus was entirely on the little girl beside him, stirring sauce with intense concentration. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Sophie said, her voice becoming more serious. "Of course. You can ask me anything. Why did Mama never tell you? About me, when she was alive?" Marcus paused, considering how to explain something so complex to a 7-year-old. They had touched on this topic before, but he knew it still confused her. "Your mama loved you very much," he began carefully. "And I think she was trying to protect both of us. She knew I was very focused on work, and she was worried that I was not ready to be a good father yet." Sophie stirred the sauce thoughtfully. "But you are a good father now." A simple statement made Marcus's throat tighten with emotion. "I am trying to be. You make me want to be better every day." "I think Mama was wrong about you not being ready," Sophie said with the directness only children possess. "I think you were always ready. You just did not know it yet." Marcus knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that were so much like his own. "You know what? I think you might be right." After dinner, they settled into their evening routine. Marcus had discovered that Sophie loved being read to just as her mother had read to her. They would curl up together on the large sofa in the living room, Sophie tucked under his arm as he read from whatever book she had chosen that day. Tonight, she had selected a story about a dragon who learned that being different made him special, not strange. As Marcus read, he could not help but think about his own journey. 3 weeks ago, he had been a man who believed success was measured only in dollars and acquisitions. Now he understood that true wealth was measured in bedtime stories, shared meals, and the trust of a little girl who called him Dad. "Dad?" Sophie's sleepy voice interrupted his thoughts.
"Ow!"
"Yes, sweetheart. I am happy I found you." Marcus set the book aside and looked down at his daughter, her eyes heavy with sleep but filled with contentment. "I am happy you found me too, Sophie. Happier than I ever thought possible." As he carried her to bed and tucked her in, Sophie wrapped her small arms around his neck in a tight hug. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, my brave girl. Sweet dreams." Mark turned off the light and quietly closed her door, then stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the peaceful sounds of his daughter settling into sleep. His phone buzzed with notifications from work, but he ignored them. Tomorrow, there would be meetings and decisions and all the responsibilities of running a billion-dollar company. But tonight, he was simply a father who had found his daughter and a daughter who had found her way home. In a world that had always rewarded him for being the smartest, the fastest, and the most ruthless, Marcus Sterling had finally discovered what truly mattered. Sometimes the most important things in life were not planned or negotiated or earned. Sometimes they simply appeared in a restaurant on an ordinary evening, in the form of a little girl with serious eyes and a photograph asking if you wanted to be part of her life. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the answer was yes.
Hit subscribe and keep watching. More stories waiting for you. Tap the video on screen. Just click and enjoy.